We're all here. Okay, thanks for being patient as we got set up and stuff. So we're Team Win version, and as we're talking about today, we're investigating solutions to the worst air quality days in Salt Lake. We wanted to tackle something that we thought was important and see what we could do about it. You'll note here that we have our whole entire team here. This was a really important thing for us to do together as a team. We came together as a team, and we want to present as a team. So that's what you'll see today. My name is Brad Stone. I am not an air quality expert by any means. I'm an IT director with BYU. Most of the people here in the team, this is kind of new to big data, or certainly to anything that does with air quality and stuff, so we've all learned a ton here in the team. But all of the team here, volunteers that came together to help share their talents to try and solve some problems. Here's what we wanted to look at. We wanted to improve health by exploring solutions to the times when there is the most pollution and the concentration of the worst pollutants. We wanted to go right for the biggest problem for Salt Lake and Utah County and across the West Central. Turns out the times of the most pollution, no surprise, it's during inversions in the wintertime. And the concentration of the worst pollutants, you've heard a little bit about them, PM 2.5, you'll hear some more about them tonight. Along the way, we all wanted to find out what it took to build a big data team, a successful team that worked together. If Salt Lake and if Utah is going to be a big data hub, then it needs to be able to create actionable results. And that means more than just data scientists. We need project managers and other people with talents to be able to come together in a team. And that's what we tried to do. We came across some really interesting scientific findings. Let me give you a quick summary of them, and we'll give you more details. First thing is, we were able to create an innovative data model that helps to predict the concentration of pollutions during inversion with a Pearson correlation coefficient of 0.89, where 1.0 is perfectly correlated. Now, surprisingly, the data indicates that PM 2.5 concentration levels are not closely correlated with the amount of vehicle traffic that is occurring during the inversion. So, therefore, asking residents to drive less during inversion is not likely to significantly improve air quality. Perhaps even more surprising is the discovery that gaseous emissions like carbon dioxide are more closely correlated to PM 2.5 concentrations than the actual trapped PM 2.5s themselves, or emissions of PM 2.5s. This indicates that if we look at what we can do to reduce gas emissions or change them, that might have much more of an effect during an inversion than reducing PM 2.5 emissions themselves. So during our presentation, we're going to provide more information about what we learned in each one of these three areas. And you're not going to be listening to me all night. We're going to let the team here come and present. Each one, we're going to have three different areas, each of these three areas here. So first of all, Greg's going to start out here. Greg Callady, he was our development lead that helped us figure out how to get the data transformed as we needed to, writing the code and stuff to do that. So Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please join me in welcoming Greg.
Thanks. So I didn't actually grow up in Utah. I grew up in the southeast. But when we thought about Utah, this is the picture that I had in my mind. With the gorgeous skiing. I moved out here for college, and I realized that Utah has a whole lot more than just skiing. It's got all of the outdoors, the mountain activities. Utah is a community, which I consider myself part of now, just loves the outdoors. But we are concerned about the effects of the poor air quality and what it does to us, what it does to the economy and to the environment. And during the winter months, oh, that was the wrong button, sorry. We see this. Have all of you guys seen this? I remember, because I didn't grow up here, I actually remember the first time I was driving down a mountain and saw this. And it was horrifying. I wanted to turn around and stay up in the mountains, you know. Of course I couldn't. I had to drive down in the gunk, get back to class. This isn't just ugly. which of course affects our economy, our tourism, but it's bad for us too. The worst particle or the worst pollutants in this soup is the PM 2.5. We had several discussions with weather and air quality experts, and we gained a fair amount of background in what's going on here. This graph graphs out our PM 2.5, that being the most critical, so to speak. That's the worst of the pollutants. And so this graphs out the 2.5. We've got micrograms per meter cubed here on the y-axis, and you've got time across the bottom. These two lines that are here are the EPA guidelines. The lower solid line is the average yearly guideline that communities aren't supposed to go over according to the EPA. It's at 15 micrograms per meter cubed. This upper line is the daily average that the EPA has set, and that's at 35 micrograms per meter cubed. This next green line here, this is Utah's yearly average for PM 2.5. It looks pretty good. It is actually decent. It's good air quality. But the trouble we have, these black spots are the daily PM 2.5. And you'll notice these spikes. You'll notice they kind of happen once or twice a year. Those are our inversions. And that's where the PM 2.5 really kicks us, really. So these spikes in the pollution, because of these spikes, Utah cities are ranked really poorly. In 2013, the state of the air, this is from the American Lung Association, it ranked Salt Lake, Ogden, and Clearfield as the 6th most polluted state in the nation, or most polluted city in the nation, for short-term pollution. Logan's at 10th, Orem and Orem-Provo areas at 11th there. The following year, Salt Lake City, Provo, Orem ranked 8th, with Logan coming in at 11th. We're consistently where we don't want to be. So air pollution in general, it's made up of various elements, sizes, content. It includes windblown sand, dust, pollen, mold, combustion particles, organic compounds, metals, and gaseous fumes. Some of these are relatively harmless, but some of them are kind of nasty. Air quality experts categorize the particulate pollution in terms of their size. That's where the PM 2.5, the PM 10 comes from. In this picture, we've got a human hair here, and we've got our PM 10s. They're the blue spot. So the human hair is about 5 to 70 microns wide, thick, and diameter. PM 10, so you can fit about 5 of those across a human hair for the PM 10. The PM 2.5, closer to 20 across that same human hair. And the thing that I found interesting when we were learning about this is the larger particles tend to not be as big of a problem for us, for animals, because it's more easily filtered out. You know, you see the hair, that's a lot of our filtration. And so that works well, but these little tiny particles are problematic. Part of the reason why they are problematic is because they're so small. They really bypass the body's natural defenses. They can get down in the lungs, down in the gas exchange area of your lung, and so some of those nasties can get into your bloodstream easier that way. And some of these particles are the carcinogens that we don't want to have to deal with those. Some of the studies that we reviewed as a team and that were presented to us, the World Health Organization estimated in 2005 that the fine particulate air pollution, which is the PM2.5, causes about 5% of the mortality from cancer of the trachea, bronchitis, and lung. Causes about 3% of the mortality in the cardiopulmonary disease, and about 1% of the mortality from the acute respiratory infections. In 2006, Dr. Arden Pope reported that for every increase of 10 micrograms per meter cubed, now you'll remember the yearly average for the EPA is 15, the daily is 35, we're talking about 10. For the short term, he reported that it increases 4.5% of heart attacks during those events, during those inversions, for every 10 micrograms per meter cubed. In 2013, there was a study done in Europe involving over 300,000 people in 9 different countries, and they figured out, or they reported that there isn't really a safe level of PM2.5. They determined that for every 10 micrograms per meter cubed, over the long term, that's your 36% increase in cancer rate. And if you remember that first graph that I had up, Utah during the inversions, regularly during the inversions, those daily spikes will go up to 70. Sometimes within the last couple of years, it spiked up over 130 in some of these particular events. So not only are inversions kind of ugly and you know, bad for press releases, but it's bad for us. It's bad for the animals and everything around us. So with that, Mike's going to talk about how we created our team and what we did to put that together. So please join with me in welcoming Mike.
All right, since I have a lot less brain cells than the rest of these guys, I was automatically made as the PM. So don't listen much to me. I'm also from Idaho, which probably adds to it as well. So I want to talk a little about how we built our team. And building a successful team is really important to how we directly impacted our results and what we can do. And I think it's great that we live in Utah, because Utah has an incredible pool of talent. And on top of it, I think some of the best talent automatically gravitates to the Utah Big Data user group. And so when we're thinking about forming our team from the beginning of the competition, I mean, it's much easier than I thought it was going to be to bring together the team. So the first thing that we did is we needed to identify roles. Now, I currently work in the VA, the Veterans Administration, and my team manages the data warehouse for all the VA data across the country. And this is used extensively with researchers and operations as well. And so we work with a lot of medical doctors and researchers who want to look at this data and analyze it. And the thing that I've learned in my job and how it applied directly to what we're doing here is that data science in itself is made up of many different roles. I don't believe it's like one superhuman that can do everything from machine learning to the analytics to the project management, business analysts, and all this stuff. So we took that same approach as we think about our team as well. What are the roles that are going to be required in order for us to be successful? And so we needed that individuals that could do analytics, individuals that can look at the data. A lot of data wrangling, cleaning up that data is a big part of this initiative as well. And then maybe a PM that can help keep things moving forward. And so we knew what roles we needed, so how do we recruit? How do we find these individuals? So we took it by a 3-tier approach. First, Brad here created a simple web form. And this is actually how I became a member of the team. The competition was announced, I got online, and I saw a web form. And so I just I don't know who this Brad Stone is, but I'm going to put my information in. The next thing I know, he's calling me up. And so that's how it started. We also did some active recruiting, where we went and deliberately found individuals that we needed to fit for those roles. And then also Nick and Pat recommended a few individuals to come onto the team as well. So we have the team. So what do we do here? How do we move forward? Now, Greg talked about this earlier. I mean, the one thing that we all had in common as a team is that we're Utah residents. We love Utah. We love the outdoors. We love to do things. I'm a big cyclist. I have been for years. I don't ride during the winter. Because of the cold. I've got the good gear and all that stuff for the cold. I can't ride because of the pollution. So if you're a cyclist at all, you know riding indoors on your trainer is really, really boring. And I'm stuck in a storage room when I ride all winter long. So it's really hard to do exercises and other activities and enjoy that. And so that's what we all had in common, is we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to look at this complex problem and maybe come up with a solution or something that can make a difference. But we also had individual stories on why we wanted to join this team and reasons why we want to do this. And I'd like to introduce to you 4 individuals who will briefly tell you about why they joined our team and what they learned from this. And the reason why we're doing this is because you'll notice the passion and the energy that we have as a team that I think directly contributed to our ability to find the results and how we move forward from here. So first I'd like to introduce to you Marcus, our data analyst.
And this is my first time at one of these competitions. My Hadoop professor, about a month and a half ago or so, said, yeah, there's this competition, go check it out, tell them you're new, and they'll go ahead and take you onto the team. And he basically said, go forth and learn. And I came out, and my personal goal was to see what people in this field were doing. And everyone on our team, if I'm not mistaken, does something different professionally. And it's all somewhat related, but still different enough that I was able to see a bunch of different careers that I could get with the with a master's degree in management information systems. It's been great seeing all these different roles come together and come up with some ideas and solutions to this issue we've got in Utah.
I'd like to introduce Anand as well.
Hi, I'm Anand. I'm an avid skier and runner, and same thing with the winter. I don't like to run outside unless I'm up in Alta because of the air quality, and every day when I go skiing, come back down, I can see it. It kind of bothers me. And I've always wanted to, know what causes it and if there's something we can do as a community. And this competition seemed like the perfect way to get involved with it. Also, I'm pretty active in the open source development of Hadoop and Spark. I've contributed a bunch of patches, but I've never interacted with people around me who are involved in the same projects or use Hadoop, so I figured this was a perfect opportunity to do that.
Thank you. And Justin.
Hi. Hi, I'm Justin, and I decided to do a competition because I've been coming to the Geek Week events and also part of the Hadoop user group for probably a little bit over a year now. And I've been wanting to go to these competitions, but so I finally found a team. So there's 3 reasons why I really wanted to join. This is first, probably the obvious reason is to learn more about big data and what that is all about, and also just really go in there and get your hands dirty on see exactly what this big data is. And then the next reason is to network. I'm a recent graduate from Salt Lake. I went to Salt Lake Community College, but before I went to I'm from the University of Utah, and so I wanted to meet people who've been in the industry who actually use big data and what kind of tools they use. So doing this, I have been able to learn more about big data and those tools that they use. But lastly, also because I am a Utah resident, and so I like to run, and I trained for my first marathon, and it was in April, so I trained all winter long. So I like to run during the winter, and that's and when I moved downtown, I really realized how bad the weather is and how bad the air is, and especially because now I work downtown, and I'm sometimes above it in the building, and you can just see it throughout the whole valley, and it's pretty bad. And so that's why I joined, and that's why I'm the team.
And Kieran.
Hello everyone. My name is Kiran, and I joined the team as part of the big data competition. And my initial opinion in joining the team is okay. Utah is mainly with respect to inversion and skiing. Those are the two options that we hear about Utah in winter. And I'm a skier, but I don't go out much in winter apart from skiing because of I'm scared of inversion part. And I started growing house plants and all to reduce the effects of inversion as such. But that's about it. And I am a professionally I'm a software developer at the firm in the Utah. And what I thought was regarding the competition, I felt as if, okay, with the technology, we can contribute something to the environment and to the Utah residents. Let's do it as such. And my takeaways from the team are passion the team members, everyone has brought to the team, and how they have analyzed regarding the PM 2.5 as such. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then here's the rest of us. So as you can see, that we really do have a broad depth of different experiences, and a lot of us were new. A lot of us haven't really looked at this big data environment, but plus when you think about it, we don't really know a lot about the actual weather itself. And so that's something that I learned in my career, is that you can put together great experts, but what really can help you propel you forward, and what helped propel us forward as a team is, and now I jumped ahead to myself. Before that, so here's the thing, we got some USU folks, okay, up there in Logan. I live in Syracuse, which is near the island, because I love riding out in the Antelope Islands. Great place to ride, by the way. You've got people in Utah County, we got people in Salt Lake County. But how we're separated geographically. So as a team, how do we get together? I mean, it's easy to form a team, but how do you actually spend time to meet and move forward? And so we took advantage, or I should say we borrowed collaboration tools from our various firms so that we can meet sometimes during work hours. 3-hour lunches are normal here in Utah, right? We know we've done it. So we would meet. So we took advantage of a free tool called Trello, which is a great tool. I've been using it for years, which is an electronic Kanban tool. And we set up a public and a private Kanban board. So the public board was more like our marketing board to try to get individuals interested in our team. And then we had a private board that would include information like our contact information. It would include all our tasks and who was assigned to those tasks. We had our data sets up there. We had some of the models and graphs. We had a variety of different information up there that anyone on the team can log into and look at and see where we're at in our process. And on top of that, we took advantage of Link and WebEx, and we had virtual meetings. And we loaded everything into Dropbox. So all our documents, our data sets, all the analysis, all that was loaded into Dropbox. And so from there, so we have this great team. We've got the roles. We've got the collaborative environment. But we need a little more. We need some help to help us move forward. And so that's why we talked to some experts. And I think domain experts are critical as you think about complex problems like the pollution and inversion. You need to have individuals to help you understand what is this data we're looking at. For instance, PM 2.5, PM10, H22. I didn't know any of that stuff. Matter of fact, I'm embarrassed to say, I didn't even know there's a difference between pollution and inversion. I thought it was the same thing. I didn't know this until I got involved in this team. And so we invited our very first meeting. We had a face-to-face meeting, and Brian Hughes from SoLogic was kind enough to spend his money and time to fly out from California to conduct a root cause analysis with our team and also with the community. We did broadcast this. And Dr. David Whiteman from the U came over and joined with us. And this was a great opportunity for us as a team to first get to know each other, but at the same time begin to talk to some experts about what this data means. And we learned a lot. That day was great. It was one of those 3-4-hour lunches that we took in the middle of the day to have a conversation with Dr. Whiteman. And I personally learned a lot. And the reality is that meeting helped set the tone for our results. That's why that was a very critical meeting for our team. And on top of it, we had Dr. Arden Pope, who did speak to the community about the health effects and pollution. So from there, we had meetings and more meetings. We had virtual meetings. We had the hackathon where we got together. We spent a lot of time getting together, and I can honestly say these guys are amazing. They did some incredible results, and that's what I'm looking forward to, is hearing from Marissa, who will begin to tell us a little more about the scientific results we found from our research. Thank you.
So thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody else who's talked so far. You've given a great introduction and a great sense of the team and how we've put together this team. And what I'm going to talk to you about now is the results, the heart of the matter. What did we find out about inversions and pollutants? So we set out and first designed a problem statement after meeting with all these experts. And these are the things that we wanted to tackle. What's the relationship between inversions and high PM2.5 levels? What other factors contribute to high levels of PM2.5? And what's the best approach that we can take going forward to try to understand and control the level of PM2.5? As you've already heard a little bit about, our approach was multifaceted. We started by getting background information. We gathered together data from diverse sources. And then we tried to identify which variables correlated well with PM2.5. From this, we wanted to derive a model that would explain how PM2.5 is produced and it's made present in our atmosphere. And then we had to validate the model. So the very first thing that we realized was that we needed to find a way to quantitate these two effects, the PM2.5 levels and the inversion. PM2.5 is easy. We measure that. It's in micrograms per meter cubed. Inversions, not so easy. Fortunately for us, we talked to Dr. David Whiteman, who recently published a paper in which he set out this inversion index, or H22, to quantify the amount of inversion in our air. The way that this works is as follows. In theory, as your elevation increases, the temperature of the air should decrease, and it does this at a constant rate. So you can plot a theoretical curve, shown here in the dash line, that tells you what the air temperature should be at each elevation point. Now, in reality, the temperature is going to vary from that. The temperature profile will go above or below this curve. And if you integrate the area between the theoretical curve and then you get a number, and that number tells you how much energy you would have to pump into the system in order to normalize this to what it should be. And this is the inversion index, or H22. So now that we have a quantitative measure for the inversion and for the PM2.5, we can start to see how they correlated. I'm showing here on the y-axis the PM2.5 levels, and on the x-axis the number of days in a winter season for the year 2002 to 2003. If we now plot what the inversion index was doing, we can see that there's a pretty good agreement. You can see that there's these spikes that correlate pretty well, but it's not perfect. In fact, if you measure the Pearson's correlation coefficient, it's only about 0.6. And so it seems that there are inversions and there are high PM2.5 levels. They do co-occur, but it's not a perfect predictor. And so we wanted to ask what other variables are there contributing to these high PM2.5 levels. To do this, we had to gather data sets. And I have to say, after hearing Brett talk today, I wish that we had access to his data sets, because this was a major part of our work. We did a lot of cleaning, a lot of scraping, and a lot of trying to figure out where to get good data. We did get about 40 years of data from Dr. Whiteman's analysis, and this came from weather balloon data and from weather station data, and included things like humidity, temperature at different elevations, this inversion index I've been talking about. It also included various air pollutants, including ozone, carbon dioxide. To this, we also added traffic volume data because we wanted to know how does people's driving behavior correlate with the inversions and with the high PM2.5 levels. And in addition, we added air quality data that was missing from the Whiteman data set. Now, this gave us over 45 different variables in total. And it's really hard to understand how so many different variables interact with one another. So our principal challenge was then to figure out some sort of relationship between these variables. To do this, we used classification and regression tools. Now, basically, the way that classification and regression works is these are two different statistical techniques. Classification works on categorical variables, and regression works on numerical variables, or continuous variables. We chose to break into classification rather than regression just because it's an easier machine learning problem to solve. So what we did to start was we took the inversion index and the PM2.5, we clustered it so that we could define high and low states for each of these, and then for each day we assigned, is it a high inversion day or a low inversion day, and is it PM2.5 high or low? We then plugged it into a classification and regression tree algorithm. So we'll start out here. Up here you can see most of the days in our data set were low inversion, low PM2.5 levels. If you look at the data, the variable that best divides this into subclasses is the inversion index, as one would expect. And that splits it into a group that's mostly high inversion, high PM2.5, and low inversion, low PM2.5. For each of these groups, we can further look at the data and say what divides it better. And so we see that in this case, the humidity determines whether it's a high inversion, high PM2.5 day, or a high inversion, low PM2.5 day. And on the other hand, carbon monoxide determines whether it's a low inversion, high PM2.5 day, or a low inversion, low PM2.5 day. The problem with these trees is that you can be overly sensitive to small changes in the data. So if you leave out a day or if you add in an extra day, they can fluctuate a little bit. To address this, we used a machine learning technique called random forests. And basically the idea is we're going to randomly select a bunch of trees. So the way this works is we take our data set, we resample it with replacement in a bootstrapping type method, and then for each of these data sets that we get out, we create a tree. These trees then are combined to get a consensus model. And this consensus model gives us a much more robust model of what are the important variables in our system. We found these 7: the inversion index, carbon dioxide levels measured at two different locations in the valley, PM10, the wind. This is a fluid number. It's a meteorological number that determines how much the wind is clearing out the valley, the maximum humidity, and carbon monoxide levels. Now, the interesting thing is we know these variables now, but we don't have any sense for the relationship between them. But before I go into that, I want to pause for a second and point out what's not on this list. What's not on this list is traffic volume. That was a variable we threw in there, but we don't see any significant correlation with traffic volume. This made us pause for a second and say, is this really the case? And so we did a sanity check. Here we've got, these are the 5 years that we looked at in our analysis, and we winnowed this down just because this is where we had really good data across all of our variables. And we plotted against this the hourly, or the vehicle hours traveled in Salt Lake Valley. And you can see these are scaled to fit onto the same plot, that there really is no correlation. You see these inversion spikes over the winter, but there aren't those concomitant spikes regularly with the vehicle hours traveled. And so based on this, we had a pretty good sense that our model was telling us what was actually happening. Based on discussions with Ray, who's right here in the front row, and for whom we're very thankful, we turned to path analysis to try to understand how these variables interacted with one another. To understand why we wanted to do this, we can look, for example, we've got 2 measurements of carbon dioxide, but we know that those two are probably reporting very much the same thing. They're both probably reporting carbon dioxide on a whole within the valley. We added back in 2 different variables that we cared about, the nitric oxide, which is known to be a gas contributing to the formation of secondary PM2.5 particles, and the vehicle hours traveled, because we still cared about this. We wanted to make sure it was consistent through our models. This was an important point to us. And then we started to think about how might these variables be related to one another. The thing about path analysis is that you join together these different variables in sets of equations to try to understand which ones cause which and which ones are related to which. One of the things that we did was we added, for example, as I talked about, these 2 different measurements of carbon dioxide probably report on an underlying overall valley carbon dioxide level. And vehicle hours traveled we're using as a reporter on overall traffic volume and the overall traffic pollution. Based on our studies and talking to the experts, we knew that PM2.5 basically came from 2 places. A very small amount of PM2.5 actually is emitted as a pollutant. And so these are the particles that are directly emitted. A larger percentage of PM2.5 comes from gaseous reactions in the atmosphere. And so we split our PM2.5 into 2 basic latent variables. We said one part is gas trapping and the other part is particle trapping. Now, if you look at the variables that we have up here, you can see that they can be grouped into a couple of different things. These guys are all sort of gases. These are all sort of weather-related, and these are particle-related. And so we started building equations and building models to try to understand how these things interacted with one another. What I'm going to show you is our best model. And I'm going to show you separately, just for clarity, first the gas part and then the particle part. But you should understand that these were both solved at the same time, so they interact with one another. So here what you see is the arrows indicate variables that influence other variables, and the numbers that are annotated represent the coefficients, how strongly those interactions are influencing either the latent variable or the final PM2.5 level. The first thing that you should notice is that, consistent with our previous analysis, the traffic volume or the vehicle hours does not have any correlation with gas traffic. There's no correlation there. On the other hand, you look at the carbon dioxide level, and this is by far the strongest reporter for gas traffic. And that was kind of a puzzle to us, because carbon dioxide isn't really one of the gases that reacts to form PM2.5 particles. Nitric oxide, which is one of those known particles that reacts to form ammonium nitrate, has a much smaller coefficient. And so this is a remaining puzzle that I think our model has brought to light that we weren't aware of before, and that could use some further study. You can see that the weather conditions definitely do contribute to this gas trapping, the inversion index being the largest contributor. The wind is negatively correlated. That makes sense. When the wind is blowing, it clears out the valley, and we don't get so much trapping. And the humidity also appears to affect this gas trapping phenomenon. If we turn, let me go back. This gas trapping has a pretty high coefficient contributing to PM2.5 levels. It's about 0.89. We can contrast this with the particle trapping. There, the coefficient is only 0.58. So the actual particles that are trapped in the atmosphere do not have as strong of an effect on the PM2.5 levels as the gas trapping does. We can see that there is an effect of these weather conditions on the particle trapping, but it's not as strong as gas trapping, and that's somewhat to be expected. You can think that gases are going to be more susceptible to being blown out of the valley and more susceptible to being trapped in stable air. Unfortunately, the only reporter that we had for particle trapping was this PM10 level, and this is where I said that Brett's data would be really great to plug into this model, because this model is robust enough that we could add in extra measures of other particles that had been measured by the EPA and say, how does that fit into our model? How does that improve our model? And so I think that's a great thing to have come out of this competition, is that we have these two complementary sets that can work together to give us some even further insight. So I told you about this model, but you should probably be wondering by now, does it actually work? During model development, we specifically excluded the last year of the data that we had. We excluded the 2012 to 2013 data. And then we decided to go back and use our model to try to predict the PM2.5 levels. If we just use H22 to try to predict PM2.5, we get a reasonably good prediction, as I showed you in 2002 to 2003. We do, however, see these spikes in PM2.5 where there is no inversion. We see these inversions where there is no high PM2.5 level. And we see these other spikes that are nowhere near inversion events, where there's still spikes happening. If we apply this to our model, we see that that's much improved. We see that the start and end of these PM2.5 spikes are accurately predicted. And overall, we've got a much better correlation coefficient. We do still have a couple of problems. The one is that we underpredict PM2.5 levels, especially here when the PM2.5 level gets really high. And we interpret this to mean that there's some sort of pressure cooker effect going on. That when PM2.5 levels get to a certain height or the inversion gets to a certain amount, then the behavior changes. And our model's not accounting for that yet. But I think that's something that's a good region for future research. We also see a couple of places where we predict that there's going to be a spike, but there's not. The data doesn't support that, but I think that's a minor problem. Overall, I think our model is doing a much better job at predicting PM2.5 and helping us to understand where this PM2.5 is coming from. So what are the key points that I want you to take away from this? First of all, PM2.5 production involves both gas trapping and particle trapping. The gas trapping, or the gaseous emissions, are much more important than the particles, but surprisingly, the short-term, day-to-day fluctuations in vehicle traffic are not affecting the PM2.5 levels. So when people tell you don't drive because it's an inversion, that's not likely to change the actual PM2.5 level. Now, our research hasn't got any information on the long-term decreases. So if we, say, had a significant long-term decrease in gaseous emissions, I think that would make a huge impact on PM2.5 levels. But day-to-day, we're not seeing that effect. We think this happens because the secondary reactions to form PM2.5 is slow. And so as a result, we get this buildup of these gases, and what you do on one day doesn't really change the atmospheric composition. And so, as I said, long-term decreases in gaseous emissions are much likely to be a better target for actually making a real difference in our air quality. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brad to conclude and give us a couple of long, big picture takeaway points.
All right. Thanks, Marissa, for explaining those findings. I wish I was a data scientist to understand all of it, but she was the data scientist lead for the team, and so we had a couple of people that were talented in that area, and they've just done, I think, a fantastic job. Okay, so what are our action items? What are we going to do about all of this stuff? So here's what we came up with. We came up with 3 different ideas of things that we could do. Okay, to reduce pollution impact during inversions. So first, the data indicates that gaseous chemical reactions are most correlated to the buildup of PM2.5 rather than the primary sources of PM2.5. So we talked about reducing overall gas emissions. That would be good, right, to do that. And that's probably an important thing to look at. However, it may not even be that hard. If we can understand what is this, chemical reaction that's going on, what's the recipe that's going on there, there may be just a couple of those elements that if we were able to reduce or change, it might tip it over and not cause those reactions to take place. So it could actually be easier if we understood that. We think that's an important place to take a look. Okay, second, there is a real social and economic cost when we ask residents to drive less during an inversion. And it looks like from our data that there's no corresponding benefit for that. So if there is, let's not ask them to do that. Let's not raise an alarm, and let's let them drive as normal so they can get to work on time, get their work done, go shopping, whatever they need to do. And let's focus on other things that can actually make a real difference in that area. Finally, and this is one that different people have different thoughts about, but we didn't want to discount potential. Okay, great. It's good to make this last one. We didn't want to discount potential moonshot ideas that might be out there to be able to solve this. You notice that Brian Hughes came in. He's one of the foremost root cause analysis people in the nation. He has done work with NASA, with GM, with nuclear facilities and stuff like that. And he was able to come in and help us break down what are all of the elements that contribute, that must be present for an inversion to be involved. And these elements include things like the sun being unable to penetrate to the ground, high air aloft that's decoupled from cold air below, the angle of the sun's rays during the wintertime, and high humidity. So while the team didn't come up with a specific moonshot idea, these findings may help others to be able to address those and perhaps tip the equation during the inversion, the weather equation, so that it cleans out faster or is cost less. One example that came up actually from a discussion during one of the big data meetings is there are a number of companies that are working on solar roadways. They actually melt the snow off of the roads and such. So you can conceive of an idea that if enough energy was released during that heat in a certain pattern, grid pattern around the city, you could open up the air enough that the sun could come down, hit it, and it could blow up the inversion without having to have it. Let the sun help us do it rather than trying to burn something up ourselves. So, so that was something that we think that moonshot ideas, as long as they understand the root cause analysis that we came up with here, could help to solve the problem. So, our team has had a great time here looking at the days with the highest levels of pollutants and the most nasty of the pollutants. We learned what it took to build a big data team, and we found some really interesting scientific findings. We've enjoyed sharing this journey with you today, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And if we have questions for the team, I'm happy to field them, and I'll do my best to repeat them, and then we'll have people that are smarter than me answer them. Right.
So there were 2 latent variables, if I understood correct. Your model mentioned.
There were actually.
So let me repeat the question.
Yeah.
Ray's asking if there were 2 latent variables.
That's what it seems like, because you combine everything into 2 latent variables. Do you know if that's correct?
So there were, in the end, 2 latent variables that contributed to PM2.5, but there were additional 2 to simplify, for example, the carbon dioxide.
Right. Okay. So, and one of them had an R squared of 0.5 or something. The other had 0.89. Or was it the overall model that gave you 0.89?
No, I'm sorry. That may not have been clear. Those were not correlation coefficients. Those were the coefficients of how much overall they contribute to in the equation. So because you do structural equation modeling, you have a coefficient of weight, how much you're weighting that factor in determining your final PM2.5 level. And so it's that weighting coefficient. It's not actually a correlation coefficient.
Okay.
Which is why you have something right at 1.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay. So if I look at L1, L2, and whatever else you had, did you all try to create a predictive model? I think you created a predictive model, right? Otherwise, you couldn't have tested the model.
Yes.
Okay. Was that some sort of a linear behavior, or did you find nonlinear behavior?
We used entirely linear equations.
Entirely linear. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So when you created that equation, you must have had a coefficient which was not tied to L1, L2, like y equals mx plus c, right? That constant.
No, we didn't.
You didn't have a constant? You didn't have a constant. Okay, you didn't have a constant because you allowed the program not to have a constant?
Yes.
You forced the program not to have a constant?
Ah,
okay. All right, we can take offline the rest of.
Hope you guys understood some of that.
Okay, mine's a much simpler question. In your diagram with all the circles, what is the direction of the arrows?
Okay, so the question was, in the diagram with all of these circles on it, what did the direction of the arrows mean?
let's go back to that slide and okay. So in all cases, I think of the direction as sort of the causative effect. So in the cases where we have, for example, the CO2 here both come from the base level CO2. The PM2.5 here comes from two causes, gas trapping and particle trapping. Now what's interesting in this modeling is that you actually treat these in two different ways. When you're taking direct variables that are reporting on an underlying phenomenon, they're one type of equation that reports back on this guy. But if you're looking at things that contribute to a latent variable, for example, humidity is a cause of gas trapping, then that's in a different form of the equation. And so that information isn't clear in these arrows other than looking at the colors.
So you have particulate trapping and gas trapping. How would there be another factor if you considered air that was brought in from other places, such as wildfires?
You could just.
Good question.
Yes.
My job.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I want
Maybe
to see how
stupid, but it's not my job. Okay, Nick said that there's gas trapping and particulate trapping, and is there another third thing that might be affect, like you were saying, wildfires or things like that?
Things that transfer.
Transfer. Okay.
That could definitely be a contributing factor. It's not something that we put into the model, but as part of the material that we submitted, we've included all the scripts that we used to do this analysis, so it should be pretty easy to adapt it if you want to look at that to include additional latent variables.
Was it high humidity or low humidity that affected the most?
Was it high humidity or low humidity that affected the most? Does anyone else want to ask that?
So in this case, it's high humidity because the coefficient is positive. So whenever humidity goes up.
And why?
I don't understand.
It's part of the chemical reaction that we kind of got a sense of that, you throw these gases in there, throwing some humidity in there, and some things are going on, and all of a sudden these 2.5 start getting created really quick in some cases. I mean, those spikes, you saw them, they just, as soon as that magic thing hits, it just boom, it shoots up through the roof. And I think that was one thing I found interesting. I'd always thought inversions are like, hey, just put a lid on Salt Lake Valley and it starts building up, right? But when we started looking at the data, we're like, sometimes it does act like that. It just takes a while to get up. A lot of times it just spikes immediately, and so that's not the understanding that we ended up with by the end of that time.
And I think the humidity also contributes in the sense that if you've got high humidity, you've got clouds, and so you're blocking the sun. Sun can't get through, keep the air up. So,
So based on your results, instead you feel that could advise next inversion that people could try more reducing traffic.
Yeah, so you're asking if we said people should drive normal during inversions? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So let's see. How about what's this? Are you going to take that one? Should people drive normally during inversions?
From the data that we looked at, there really doesn't seem to be a correlation there. And so, as Brad had mentioned earlier, there is an economic impact to asking people to not drive. And there doesn't seem to be a benefit.
So they should remove the warnings from the highway safety.
That's what the data seems to say. Yeah.
now that's not to say we're claiming that long-term decreases in traffic won't change things. But short-term changes, only changing your behavior when there's an inversion, that doesn't seem to have any effect.
So if someone that runs those signs, happens to see this and we convince them, then maybe they'll say, have a happy day instead.
So my question might be part of the action plan, and you don't have the answer, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So you find this correlation with trapping the gas. and the CO2. So is it your initial thought that, does your data show what the sources contributing to the CO2 are, or do you really think it's more of a chemical reaction? So inventorying the sources isn't really the question.
Yeah. So the question, if I understand correctly, is that we're talking about the different gas trapping that's going on. We talked about CO2. Is it a lot of things that are making up the problem, or is it CO2 and we're looking at sources of that? Is that kind of what you're asking about? Okay. Do you want to take that one?
All right. We don't have information about which sources release CO2 or other pollutants. There's some data, I'm sure, out there about big companies, but we just didn't have access to those data or time to get to it. The other thing that I think I want to highlight here is that we don't necessarily know that CO2 is what's causing these PM2.5 levels to be high, or is it something else that's also trapped at the same time with CO2, but CO2 is just what we observe. Right. So I think that the primary thing that we need to do is understand these reactions better and understand why is it that CO2 is such a good predictor of high PM2.5 when, as far as we know, it's not one of the gases involved in these reactions.
So one of the air quality experts, one of the air quality experts along the way mentioned that all PM2.5 is due, and therefore is almost always something that comes from a man-made reaction of some sort of combustion reaction. Did you find anything different than that? Is that accurate? And does that mean that this gas trapping, it's all man-made?
Okay, so Nick is asking, he's saying that at least according to one air quality expert, he believes that most of the PM2.5 is man-made through combustion primarily. Did we find that, or is it PM2.5 coming from other things besides just combustion burning things?
We didn't look specifically at that, so I can't speak specifically to
wildfires. Is that what you asked
Yeah,
about?
wildfires was one of the things that there are a few fires that don't count, or they count it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we found was that it seems like it's the actual pollution of these small particles isn't necessarily what's causing the problem. The problem is these reactions in the upper atmosphere that are bringing together, for example, things to produce ammonium nitrate. And that's, as far as I know, quite a lot. 70%, is that correct? 70%? 70% of PM2.5 that's measured is ammonium nitrate. And that's produced by secondary reactions. It's not polluted in that form. It's produced as ammonia and the nitrates, and volatile organic compounds contribute to that.
Okay.
In Cache Valley, cows are actually a huge contributor to the PM2.5 in Cache Valley. The chemical reactions that are happening there are different than in Salt Lake Valley, but there are still PM2.5 issues in both valleys.
Yes.
Other questions? That's a good question.
Yeah, I just so this prediction model, is really accurate, and it was derived from downloading various data sets that have been collected from sensors and things like that. Is there a way to collect that data in real time? So you basically came up with a model and then back tested it against data that was downloaded. So would it be possible to create like an application or something that you're gathering this data in real time and you're predicting the probability of an inversion if we're headed towards an inversion? I pay attention to the weather, like I wake up in the morning and I see what it's going to be like that day, but I don't watch the news or see what's coming in the future. I just check it. So I'm just wondering if there'd be any value in that, or if this question makes sense to collect that in real time, create an app saying we have an inversion coming, or there's a probability to do that. Maybe I want to head to the mountains if that's coming, or not go, do something on a certain plan around that.
Sure. Okay, so the question was, we have this prediction model that helps us to be able to say, based on certain variables, what is likely going to be the PM2.5 concentration, and it appears to be matching pretty accurately.
We're headed in that direction.
So could we gather that data in real time and then let people know, hey, an inversion's coming, or excuse me, a high concentration of PM2.5 is coming, or even better yet, it's ending, one of those two. Could we do that in real time? I know we talked about that as a group.
We talked about that a lot as a group, and that's kind of where we wanted to go, or at least some of us wanted to go.
but this type of analysis that we perform is kind of a precursor. And so that would be, in my mind, I'm just talking for me, maybe not the whole crew, in my mind, that would be a great follow-up to take this model, to take this data, and do that extra work to try to create something like that.
There would be different types of sensors that would report it. Maybe they report to a database, but they don't report to a central place.
Well, and that is part of the problem, right? Because this data, a lot of this data is gathered on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and we have the luxury of being able to roll it up. We could roll it up really slow, it didn't matter, we're doing the evaluation. When you transition to try to create something that would, I hate to call it real time, because really, if it's 6 hours, who's going to care about 6 hours in this application?
At a frequency.
But if you're talking about that where you want to know there's a 20% chance that we're going to have a PM 2.5 problem tomorrow, then we do have to be able to ingest that data a little more quickly. And there is, we did discover with a lot of our weather experts, there is a very limited number of the weather sensors in Valley. My personal opinion is the EPA says you must have 3. So why in the world would we install more than 3? You know, but in order to get some of that, in order to get some of that really rich data, we, you know, somebody might have to look at getting more sensors out there and being able to correlate, you know, because there's all these pockets within the valley even of it's really bad here, it's not as bad there. There's some really funky stuff that goes on, and we just don't have the sensors to collect that data. So there's several issues that made that particular type of predictive application very, very difficult. I hope that we get there. I hope that we're able to leverage this evaluation, this research, into getting something like that. Because how cool would that be to know that it's coming?
Well, yeah, one thing, I mean, you mentioned that a way to disperse the inversion once you're in it, if you predict it, forgetting that, you might be able to take that a step further and
Exactly.
maybe prevent it or do something.
Yeah.
I actually too far of thinking ahead. Headed there, there's something we can do. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a whole lot easier to change it when there's just a little bit to change than when we're already there.
Right.
And we talked about that a lot inside.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That was one area we started hitting down, moonshot once again type of thing. But, you know, is there a way that you could, I even went to lunch with a fluids guy, you know, to find out, you know, how could you create some kind of a pattern that would disrupt this from happening, you know, or you know, the winds are coming over the mountains, you know, how could you get it just dip a little bit, you know, to keep it from power shortening or things like that. But that's just too much. But yeah, it's exciting and fun to think about, you know, the way you can do it.
And you were able to accurately predict a data set for a year time span.
So,
but it's a data set.
It's a data
not,
set, right? And so it's using the data from that day to predict what's happening on that day. So in order to be able to do what you were talking about, we would have to go back to the model, redevelop for us things like, say, a few days beforehand. So these predictions rely on knowing what the carbon dioxide levels are on that day. We haven't looked at, you know, 3 days in advance. Can we predict what's coming 3 days from now?
But they'll take some weather factors and other things.
Yeah.
Good. Other questions? Thanks very much. I appreciate you guys being excited about this and sharing with us.